Ladies and gentlemen, today we have the distinct pleasure of meeting Mr. Michael Mair, the author of Kaiten. Mr. Mair, it's an absolute pleasure to meet you today.
Well, it's a pleasure to meet you, and greetings to all of you that are watching this video.
Yes, out in YouTube Wonderland, please tell us, the audience out there, the military enthusiasts and history enthusiasts in general, about your book.
Yes, well, the title of the book is called Kaiten. That is the correct way to pronounce it in English, Kaiten. The meaning of the word Kaiten in the Japanese language is to make a great sky change, or the other term that's often used is heaven shaker. And so that is what the meaning of Kaiten is. My father, John Mair, served as a sailor in World War II and Korea, and he was aboard a U.S. Navy oiler, USS Mississinewa. The hull number was A059. Now, this was one of the newest oilers in the fleet. She was the largest size oiler that the U.S. Navy had, quite a large ship. And so in June 1944, USS Mississinewa left Norfolk, Virginia, headed south to Aruba to take on a load of fuel oil. They were tracked by a German U-boat as they were attempting to enter the Panama Canal. And that ship was fully loaded, and it was able, because of the power at that time that they were putting into oilers, it outran the U-boat and its escort and hit 21 knots.
That's amazing.
Safely got through the Panama Canal, went up the coast of California, took a left and went to Pearl Harbor. Once Mississinewa reached Pearl Harbor, they took on supplies and headed for the Pacific Theater. And so during the course of its time in the Pacific, they were at Manus in the Admiralty Islands. They did many fueling trips out to sea with Admiral Halsey's Third Fleet. They were part of the Third Fleet. Did many fueling stops. The next staging area, as the Allies advanced, was Ulithi Atoll. Now, Ulithi is located on the equator, about 350 miles southeast of Guam. The atoll is a circle of islands. It's the top of an extinct volcano. Of course, the island's popping up through, and the entire lagoon, 22 miles by 11 miles, is 140 feet deep. Top of an extinct volcano. It was the perfect anchorage for Admiral Halsey's ships. They could put 300 ships in there, and they could safely anchor, so much shelter from the weather. The location was really strategic because the invasions of Iwo Jima and Okinawa took place staging out of Ulithi Atoll, and also too participation in the Philippines invasion as well. In Japan, in early 1944, the idea was proposed, and this became rather numerous, the concept of TOCO, or suicide special attack weapons. What that meant is that a human being, a Japanese sailor or soldier, would give their life for the emperor by using a weapon of some sort, and the Kaiten was the most secretive of all the weapons, and very few Americans know about this. It was a manned torpedo, 48 feet long. It used the drive mechanism from a Type 93 torpedo. They put a midships cabin in the center for the sailor to be in, a little crank-up periscope, and all they had to control the weapon were a series of valves and so on to be able to help maintain buoyancy. It was very difficult to do. They were supposed to maintain 15 feet below the surface of the water so they would not be spotted on an attack track. And that was hard to do. As they used fuel, they had to bring in seawater to compensate for the lost weight of fuel and so on. And these were carried in on the decks of the large fleet submarines, I-class submarines. They could put 4 Kaiten in V-shaped chocks on the deck, and they would strap them down to the deck. The Kaiten were carried to the target area by the fleet submarines. This weapon was designed to attack in anchorages. remember, it was a one-man torpedo. It was not like the two-man midget submarines at Pearl Harbor
Yeah.
and Sydney, Australia, where they carried 18-inch torpedoes, two of them in the bow, and they would attack in a more conventional manner.
Wow. Suicide missions.
Yes, it was. It was a one-way mission. Once the Kaiten pilot, and they called them pilots because these were officers that were drawn from naval aviation training programs. This late in the war, there was very little fuel available to train new pilots, and so the distinction was that's why they called them Kaiten pilots. One thing of note that I think is really important for the public to understand, the Kaiten officers, many of them were Naval Academy graduates, highly educated. They were a very elite force. They volunteered. The selection was very rigorous for those sailors, and that was very different from the Kamikaze Special Attack Corps, because in many cases the Kamikaze pilots could not even land the airplane.
Oh,
they
I
had
see.
rudimentary training.
Wow.
And they were often escorted by veteran pilots in Zeros and so on, en masse going towards the U.S. fleet. The Kaiten pilots went through very rigorous training, and once again, they were officers. They felt in the Kaiten program that this weapon had 1.5 tons of explosive in its warhead. Now, a conventional torpedo would vary between 600 and 1,100 pounds of explosive. A Kaiten with 3,418 pounds of explosive could break the back of an aircraft carrier. And the strategy or the tactical doctrine was, if we could sink 100 American ships, perhaps Japan could sue for peace and not have the home islands invaded. Now, many people feel that these types of weapons and the individuals involved may be fanatics. I have found that was not the case.
Right.
I interviewed 350 American sailors for this book and formed a relationship with dozens of the Kaiten officers in Japan over the course of many years. It took some time to earn their trust.
Yes.
And I was able to do that in actually a rather simple manner. All of them, most of them, were Naval Academy graduates. Many of them had lost like roommates and friends from the academy aboard 6th Fleet submarines.
Right.
And so often I would receive a picture, or they would tell me about their best friend that was lost during the war. And I had American veterans sending me private photographs over a long period of time. And so often, those personal photographs and description of how they sank a Japanese submarine would come to me. So I would send that information to Japan, and so these officers could learn more about the fate of what happened to their friends. It helped start to form a relationship with them, which was vitally important.
Yes.
And so that was certainly a big help. The other thing too is I wanted to have a fair and balanced account of the story from the American side and the Japanese side. I felt the story needed to be told truthfully with the facts, with no bias. That was really important to me. So over the course of time, I managed to accomplish that particular goal, despite the fact it took a long time. With Book Kaiten, I have a co-author, Joy Waldron.
Yes, Joy.
Joy lives in France.
Yes.
And Joy was an investigative journalist all her life, and for a good number of years, she was a naval copy editor. And so we agreed to collaborate on the book. I did research work and so on, and Joy is a wonderful wordsmith, and she was able to work with me. We put this story together, and so that it was told in a really well thought out way.
And it's a very nice, pleasant read.
Yes,
so
it
to
is.
speak.
It's a very pleasant read.
It's not dry at all. It's smooth.
It is really about the human drama story
Yes.
of what happened. It's
Yes.
not a dry history book. And so another thing that really helped a lot is we were writing this, we were working on this, I sent manuscripts to Japan that were translated by my translator Tomoko, who lives in Hiroshima. She would give the translated manuscript, chapters and so on, to the Japanese Kaiten pilots. They would review the material to make sure it was accurate and that it was not biased and was truthfully told. And over time, they began to give me some very good information, not to mention many photos in this book that have not been seen here in the U.S., only in Japan. And some of the photos actually are from their museum that the public in Japan has not seen. It wasn't until the 1990s that the Japanese public began to really become aware of the Kaiten Special Attack Corps program.
Wow,
It was
so
kept
late
secret,
after the war.
Very late
Yeah.
after the war. Now the mission of the descendants of the Kaiten pilots is a group called Kaiten Kenshokai.
Yes.
There are a few siblings left, brothers and sisters, and of course, sons, daughters, nephews, nieces, grandchildren, and they still have an organization in Japan. They have a memorial ceremony every year in November, and this is to remember the lives of the 135 Kaiten pilots that went on a mission or were lost in training, to have a memorial for them. This,
Wow, that many, just in training.
yeah, and training and on missions as well.
Wow.
Now, the total losses during the Kaiten Special Attack Program was approximately 2,500 sailors. But you have to remember, the large fleet submarines carried the Kaiten into battle. And so if a submarine was sunk with 4 Kaiten aboard, the entire crew was lost.
Yes.
And that accounted for the large number of lives lost during this time period.
Wow.
It has been a gratifying experience. My father, John Mair, as I mentioned, was a survivor of USS Mississinewa.
Yes.
He was 19 years old.
That is your direct connection.
That is my direct connection
Yes.
with this particular story.
Yes.
I did not know about this growing up. And it was actually my son, his oldest grandchild, that broke the ice with Grandpa in 1995. And I found this true across cultures. Very often veterans from many countries would not talk about it with their sons or daughters, but as they got older and a grandchild would ask a question, they would not refuse to answer a grandchild.
Yes.
They would, tell a grandchild something about it.
That is interesting.
It's part of their legacy.
That's right.
It is part of their
They
legacy.
didn't talk about it.
Yes.
But
Yes.
with their grandchildren.
With the grandchildren, it's a different story.
Oh,
and that
yes.
was as true in Japan as it is in the United States.
Yes.
And so that really was a factor. And so I began to do research in 1995, and actually it took me almost 2 years just to piece together my father's own memories by retracing the steps of Mississinewa, where she sailed, to help jog his memory of things that had happened. In total, 350 American sailors I interviewed, either in person or on the telephone.
Yes.
They were part of these events when Mississinewa was sunk at Ulithi Atoll on November 20th, 1944. The Japanese approached with 2 I-class submarines, I-47, with Captain Zenji Arita in command.
Yeah, always, but I'm not really
He had the co-inventor of the Kaiten, Sekio Dishina, aboard his submarine, and the second submarine was I-36. Those 2 approached Ulithi Atoll. They were released during the 19th of November, and their goal was to penetrate into the lagoon where Admiral Halsey's 3rd Fleet ships were anchored. Of course, the Japanese wanted to be able to attack aircraft carriers, battleships, the large warships.
yeah, that's in the ballpark.
Sekio Nishina was successfully managed to penetrate the anchorage exactly where he was supposed to go. And he slipped in. And with his stubby periscope that was cranked up by hand on a cable, his periscope was spotted by 3 officers of the decks of 3 U.S. oilers that were anchored near Mississinewa. And they told me in person about watching that featherweight of that periscope approaching Mississinewa, which was fully loaded, ready to go to sea.
Yes.
And Sekio Dishina hit it forward of the bridge in the starboard wing tank. the explosion broke the ship from the well deck all the way to the keel, broke it nearly in half.
Wow.
The centerline aviation gasoline tank was full of fumes, and that blew up less than a minute after the Kaiten strike.
Wow.
Seikyo Nishina was ejected from his Kaiten. The hatch blew open. And for those of you who read the book, you will learn about what happened to him because the sailor that pulled his body from the water told his story. And if you do buy this book and read it, you will learn about what
the
happened.
suspense
Yes.
can only be broken by reading the book.
Yes, that is entirely,
Yeah.
it's entirely
You're quite
true.
the salesman, Mike. Quite the salesman.
Well, I promised my father as he was dying that I would complete this
Yes.
and get it published. And then his request was, I don't want people to forget about my generation, which was later named the greatest generation by Tom Brokaw.
Yes.
And he said, I want people to remember what we did as to stop the world from being taken over by people like Hitler and,
Yes.
and
Tojo.
Tojo.
Yep.
And so they basically they saved the world. It was a global conflict.
It was.
Yet this particular story is unknown by most Americans, and it is very much a compelling read. And the photographs, of course,
Yes.
have not been seen elsewhere as well.
And it's an easy read. I can see. I can
It
tell.
is.
I mean, just covering a few pages of it, it's very flowing.
It's a very easy read.
Yeah. One
Anybody-
weekend, you knock it out.
Yes,
and you learn so much.
Yes, you could.
Yes.
And also, too, it keeps you going because of the fact that it is the human drama tale.
That's
what happened
right.
on both sides.
That's right.
Surprisingly, the Japanese decided to publish this book in the Japanese language in
yes.
2017.
Yes.
And there was a reason for that.
Yes.
They felt the story was very fair,
That's
very
the
balanced.
key. That's
and,
the key.
And was truthful.
Yes.
And so they felt that this book was justified to be published in the Japanese language and
Yeah.
is still selling in Japan today.
Yes, of course.
And the secondary market for these books is also selling very well in the U.S.
Yes.
I have contacts all around the globe, especially with maritime nations such as Great Britain. But my closest friends and contacts are in Japan.
God bless them.
And so it has been a real privilege to be able to write this story
Yes.
so that future generations know a little bit more about what happened, and especially something this unique.
Now, Mike, how can people out there in YouTube Wonderland get a hold of a copy of your book?
Okay, we have a website, USS Mississinewa.com.
Okay.
Also, people can contact me by email, and my email is Mike, M-I-K-E, Mair, M-A-I-R, at outlook.com.
Okay, just like what we see on the screen right now.
Yes,
Yes.
that is absolutely correct.
Right
And so
there, yes.
you can email me, or you could go to the website and order a book, and we'll be happy to personally sign it, put a special message in if you wish,
Yes.
and get the book to you.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
And just a commentary, these were not just, just as you mentioned, they were educated. They
Yes.
knew what they were doing.
Yes.
These are not these boobs that we know, like from these terrorist organizations of today.
No.
They knew what they were doing. They saw the economy of trying to sink 100 capital ships to turn the tide of the war.
And also, too, the Kaiten pilots told me
Yeah.
they knew the war had been lost by the end
They
of
knew
1940.
it.
They knew it.
They were of no illusion.
They acknowledged it.
Yep.
And because when I asked, why did you volunteer for this program,
Yes.
their comment was, we knew that our government was not going to give in,
Yes.
and that if there was an invasion of the homeland islands,
Yes.
that our sisters and brothers and our parents would be slaughtered on the beaches.
Oh, they knew that very well.
Yes, and
They
fe-
knew that very well.
Yes, and they felt that if they could give their life and this program was successful, perhaps Japan could sue for peace
That's right.
and not have the home islands invaded, because they knew there would be tremendous loss of life
Yes, yes.
if that occurred.
They of all people appreciated the fanaticism. Well, I mean that's a little bit of a sharp term, but the dedication of the Japanese people, right? Because after the second atomic bombing of Japan, they had a little meeting whether to continue the war or not, and half this group said, yes, let's continue the war to the death, even after the second bomb was dropped.
I think with in these special attack groups, and that could be a variety of things. It could be the Shinyo suicide boats, Kamikaze airplanes, the Oka, jet bomb that the Americans called Baka.
Yeah, Baka,
They're the Fukuru divers that carried an explosive charge that were supposed to try and destroy a landing craft that was unloading troops.
Yes, yes.
So there were a variety of different approaches, and in any one of these programs, you're going to have a few fanatics, but
Yes.
by and large, from what I've learned,
Yes.
that was not the case in
Yes.
many instances.
These were well-reasoned people,
especially
willing to give up their lives for the greater cause.
Especially in the Kaiten
Yeah.
Corps, because of the Japanese Navy was very westernized.
Yeah.
They were trained by the British Royal Navy in the late 1800s.
Interesting.
Their customs
Yes.
and so on were very similar to the American and British navies.
Oh, okay.
So they were a very professional military organization, very different from the Imperial Japanese Army.
Right,
That,
right.
That often would have more of the peasant class that were less educated
Yes.
compared to the Kaiten pilots that were virtually all had advanced educations,
Yes.
college degrees, or quite a bit of college.
That's right.
And be able to obtain that education in that time period, you had to be the best of the best in order to have the privilege of going to get that type of education.
Oh, amazing, yes. And in the year 2025, it seems like there's this love affair with Japan nowadays. Everybody talks about, oh, I got to visit Japan, meet the people, and all that good stuff. And to the military collector, they have to understand that, no, it's not just German, Russian, or
Yes.
English military that they should take a look at. Look at Japanese military.
Yes.
Because it's high quality, it's good stuff. And on top of it, wow, guys like you, Mike, you're opening our eyes.
Oh, no.
Well, thank you. It's and I would certainly agree. It's been a great opportunity for me to learn about Asian culture. I did visit Japan with my wife in 2019. It was a wonderful experience.
Yes.
I spoke at the Kaiten Memorial Ceremony,
Yes.
which has been going on since 1962.
Yes.
And just like we have our Memorial Day in the United States,
Yes.
the Kaiten Kenshokai group has a memorial service held each year. The date is selected.
Okay.
The date is related to this book. The mission, the inaugural mission was called Kikasui. It sank USS Mississinewa. I did manage to prove that the co-inventor of the weapon sank Mississinewa, which was very surprising to the Japanese.
Yes.
And I had the privilege in 2013 to visit that war grave and make 6 scuba dives on Mississinewa.
Wow.
In 2013.
Wow.
And so I think I've lived the full experience.
Oh boy. And your father is definitely smiling down from heaven.
I certainly hope so. Yes,
Yes.
indeed.
My God. And what a life achievement.
Yes, it was done to honor not only my father but all the veterans from the greatest generation.
Yes. And in closing, you have any final words for the world in terms of like world peace and how we can, better live our lives?
I think the most important thing is we need to understand each other.
Yes.
That is one of the reasons why I traveled to Japan, because I was having trouble getting closure on this story, and I felt if I could go visit with Japanese families that lost a loved one, I could learn about what they've been through and understand from the human perspective
Yes.
what they experienced.
Yes.
And I felt if I could understand that and learn about what they'd been through,
yes.
it would form a better relationship and bond and a deeper understanding. And I think that's vitally important. I think all around the world we need to be gentle and kind and respect each other.
Yes.
Yes.
Boy, you really hit it. You hit the big nail on the head, Mike. Right? Especially today, we are so polarized.
We are.
We should open up the debate, get
Yes.
back to old school understanding each other,
Yes.
and not
absolutely.
hate each other.
Absolutely.
That's right.
That was something in Japan. My wife and I found that Japanese people be wonderful,
Yes.
courteous and kind and respectful of
Yes.
each other.
That's right.
They went out of their way to help us in any way they possibly could. They were
Yes.
absolutely wonderful. Experience I wouldn't give away for anything.
Yes. Oh my God! Thank you very much, Mike.
Well, thank you very much.
It's an absolute pleasure. And once again, you know, we're going to put the link on how to get a copy of the book and how to reach out to Mike by email.
Okay.
All righty. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate it. Enjoy the show.
Okay.
And hopefully we'll see you in the next shows.
All right. Bye.
All right. Thank you.